What's really been the formula for Washington for this 4-game winning streak?
Once again, it goes to the defense. And the irony behind this is the best defensive player on the team is out for the year with a torn ACL. The Washington football team have been able to go out and beat two relatively good teams, and they beat a surging Carolina Panthers at the time in which they defeated them. They beat the Bucks 29-19, so they held Tom Brady to 19 points. The next week, they go out and they beat a hot Carolina team, and they won 27-21. Then they go and they beat Seattle last week 17-15, and then this week beating the Raiders 17-15. The fact that both the last two games ended at the same score of 17-15, Kyle and I were talking about it, is absolutely insane. But what I'm looking and I'm saying, you know what? This team has earned my respect. They started the season off in a way that was just not ideal. Ryan Fitzpatrick goes down, Curtis Samuel goes down. They were rattled with injuries. The defense wasn't playing up to par after the great year that they had last year. Taylor Heineke gets inserted after the great postseason game that he played against the Bucks last year, and he was spotty at best. You know what I mean? Everyone was kind of just like, "Oh my God, here it goes, here it goes." And they found a way to just keep the momentum going. Antonio Gibson's playing great. Terry McLaurin's playing great. Logan Thomas is playing great. I mean, the Washington football team fears Logan Thomas tore ACL. Wow, that couldn't have been even worse. The fact that I just read that as I kind of scrolled down as ESPN refreshed, wow. Sorry, guys, that was a big train of thought that was lost. The point is, Taylor Heineke is doing what he needs to do to win football games, whether that's him extending plays with his legs, him making great reads and not turning the ball over, and then him leading his team down the field to win a game, to kick a game-winning field goal. I'm telling you, I saw the Logan Thomas news, and I can't stop stuttering now because I legit said the man's name, and it popped up. Like, that's whew. Washington's playing effective football. They're playing efficient football. Ron Rivera is a man amongst men, a man amongst boys, and a great, phenomenal head coach. He's always been able to rally the troops behind him. He has always been able to get a locker room to support in his methodology, in how he likes to coach, and it's showing. Once again, Washington made the playoffs last year by winning the division. I don't necessarily know if they're going to be able to do that this year, but they are catching up to Dallas. Washington is 6-6. Dallas is 8-4. They have been struggling as of late, so I'm not going to rule it out. But I'm not going to rule out the fact that they're competing for a wild card spot, because right now, if the season ended, they would have a seed, which I believe would be the 6th seed or the 7th seed, one of those two. So they're doing what they need to do. They're winning football games, and they're doing it maybe not in the most prettiest of ways, but they're capitalizing and they're getting these W's. So big shout out to Taylor Heineke doing what he needs to do. And sorry for Logan Thomas tearing his ACL. Shit, I'm still stuck on that.
Yeah, that was probably one of the most unfortunate news stories that I saw from today, because he had been playing pretty solid football for Washington, but it's just unfortunate to hear the news about him tearing his ACL. The thing with Washington that kind of confuses me is, granted, their defense has been holding teams to either around 20 points or under 20 points the last month or so, but that's pretty much it. They do get somewhat of a pass rush, but obviously that pass rush has been hindered because, oh my God, I totally lost his name. Chase Young.
Chase Young.
Thank you. Chase Young going out with the torn ACL. But the one thing that I think Washington does very well defensively is they get teams off the field on third down. And it's really kind of been the main point that I've been focusing on, because they don't cause a lot of turnovers. In the last 4 games, they really haven't been able to turn the ball over that much or just have takeaways on the defensive side of the ball. But the standout to me is the fact that they're holding teams to around a 20 to like 30% rate of third down conversions. What that tells me is, granted, they're not turning the ball over, they're not getting a huge pass rush, but they're getting teams off the field and they're getting the ball back to Taylor Heineke and that Washington offense. And with the way that these games have played out as far as the last month or so, it's effective. I thought that Bucks win was the catalyst of it all. And really, it was that 10-minute drive that Washington had against the Buccaneers that I really think got the confidence building in this team that they could really compete at a very high level if they can knock off a team like the Buccaneers in that manner. And I thought they had a very solid win, like you mentioned, against the Panthers, a close win against Seattle prior to this week, and going on the road to go up against an up and down Raiders team, but to hold them to 15 points, that's quite a feat because the Raiders have a pretty high powered offense this year with Derek Carr having a pretty phenomenal year. But I got to give Washington credit. This is a team that, for me, they've been up and down the entire year, so I don't have a lot of faith in Washington. But with the last month or so, they've earned a little bit of my respect, pulling off these last 4 wins in a row. And looking at their schedule, the next 5 games that they play from here on out, they're all NFC East divisional games. And they got a huge test going up against Dallas next week. So Dallas comes to Washington to play in DC. And I'm still of the mindset that Washington can compete with Dallas. I just don't know if they're going to be able to overcome just the firepower that Dallas presents on a weekly basis with that offense with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper, and Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield. But the real test for me, as far as whether or not that I think Washington is legit, is if they could beat Dallas next week. That's where I'm really kind of holding my cards at this point. But as of right now, I got to give credit where credit is due. Washington is playing effective football. Granted, I wouldn't say it's the most flashy, but it's doing enough to get by some of these teams and getting wins. And I got to give them a little bit of respect for that. But the real test is against Dallas this upcoming week.